over? Any questions in general? Okay, someone in the chat said nested loops. Someone said general things we should expect on the exam. Okay, we can go over some nested loops, the format of the exam. Were you guys provided a practice exam by any chance, or some practice problems that you could perhaps send? Okay, yes. Could you possibly send that in the chat? That way I could take a look and see exactly what you guys are going to be tested on. Okay, let's see these. Okay. Okay, wow, that's certainly a lot of questions. Wow. All right, since we had some requests on nested loops, we'll start with that then. Alrighty, so we have a couple of different nested loop problems here. I could see some of these are the famous star staircase examples. Okay. Well, there's certainly a lot of these, but we can totally go over a couple of them. All right, so if we take a look at this first one per se, right? Write a complete C++ program that asks the user for a number n and then prints a picture showing a triangle that points to the right that has 2n minus rows and n columns. For example, if n equals 4, the program would print as follows. Okay, cool. So if that's the case, let me actually pull up a compiler for this. That way we could actually see how the code works. I think it's a little bit better than if I was just writing. Give me 1 second. All right, awesome. We are all set. Okay, so I have my little compiler over here, so we should be able to use this and create the output for these questions, right? So first things first, it asks the user for a number n and then prints the picture below. All right, so we want to prompt the user, enter a number, right? And I want to make sure that I have an int n variable set up. I don't have to initialize it to anything because I'm going to use a cin statement to initialize it, right? You just output to the user, enter a number, and you take in the value with C in, right? We got C out and C in. Now we're going to use this number to create the picture that we're asked for, right? So we're printing the picture that has 2n minus 1 rows and n columns. Okay, so in this case, n is 4, right? So I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And that would be 2 times 4 minus 1 is 7. And there's going to be 4 columns. So let's do ourselves a favor and start off with half of the staircase here, this part. Because this part is a little bit easier in the sense that I don't have to worry about like the bottom half of it, right? This is saying for the first column, give me 1 star. For the second column, give me 2 stars. Third, 3, fourth, 4. So with this, the number of stars corresponds to what number column we're on. So if we create our little nested loop, right, I could say for I is equal to 0, right? Int I, sorry. You have to always initialize your index variable. So that's our starting point. We're starting off at column 0, right? And now I want to go until, well, how many columns do I want? I want to have 4 columns. So until I is no longer less than 4. And we're going to do I plus plus. And since this is a 2D array of stars, we could think of it like that, we're going to have to make this a nested loop. So what I'm going to do is instead of saying I'm going to use R for row and C for column to make it a little easier. Right? And anytime I got a 2D array, I'm going to also need to create my columns here the same exact way. Okay, cool. So now that we have our nested loop, what exactly are we doing for each of them? Well, remember, this is saying loop my rows. Each time you're going to print a certain number of columns. So we know that it's going to be 4 rows and 4 columns. That means for each row, I want 4 columns, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this case, right, I want to print the number of stars that are given to me in that column. So if I'm in the, actually, I should change this to 1 instead, right? Because the first column means 1 star. And because of that, I also am going to change this to less than and equal to. The reason for this is because now that I increase this by 1, I want to increase this by 1, right? I can say less than or equal to 4 so that 4 is the less value. Or to even simplify it, I can just say less than 5. Either way works because you have value 1, value 2, value 3, and value 4 that are all valid here. So for each column here, I want to print, see out, I'm thinking of Python, see out a star for each time that I'm going to be going through this for loop over here, right? So if I'm going to be doing this, sorry, just kind of distracting that people are coming in. Hold on 1 second. So if this is the case, right, we know that the column is going to print each of these columns, right? So I want to make sure that also I keep another variable to keep track of how many stars are going to be printed, right? So I'm going to actually create 3 loops for this. One is for the rows, one is for the columns, and one is going to be for the stars. I can say int s is equal to 1, and it's going to be printing as many stars as my column is. So s is going to be until it gets to the C term. So I'm going to say until it's less than or equal to C. So what this will have me do is if, let's say, C is equal to 3, it loops 1, 2, and 3. It won't go any further than that. And then S++. So this is going to have me do the number of stars that are equal to my columns. So in this case now, let me give this a run and see what it would be. The only thing is I want to make sure that after each row is completed, right? I want to do outside of this loop, C out and L. And the reason for this is because remember, this row, this R variable is my row. After each time I finish a row, before it increments to the next row, I want to go to the next line. So I'm going to have a C out and L. Let's see how this does it. Let's say 4. That did not work. Um, it's this part. Not sure why that's not working.
I think it's supposed to be N.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So in this case, it's supposed to be N, not 5. I'm using the example that's over here. So it's based on the number that's given over here, right? I was using the actual value of N equals 4 for this. So you want to take the actual number of the variable. You want to take the variable itself, not the actual number. So because of that, it's not always going to be that number. Okay. Hey, Yulon, can you help me out with this a little bit, please?
Shouldn't the inner for loop go up to R for one row? Because if you go like for row 1, you print 1, row 2, you print 2. So for the for loop, you just print R times no.
Yeah, that might be what it would. Okay, yeah, that's where it's going. Okay, so I was basing it based on the column. In this case, it's supposed to be the row itself, right? Because the row is telling us what number we're doing. The column's not telling us how many to put. So we're getting a little closer to that.
Yeah, I was thinking of just printing the number of times that it's on for like the row. And then like once it reaches the halfway, we just decrement. I was thinking of just holding a different counter for the amount of stars we print. And then once it hits the midpoint, we just decrease it and then print that out. That's how I was thinking about it.
All right. Do you want to try it on your end?
Let me try on the online compiler too. And I'll try to send the code maybe.
Yeah, if you want to share your screen. I'll copy and paste my code into the chat.
Can I even see chat again? I don't know if I can see chat.
Don't worry, I got it. I could see.
So, or and start at 1, right?
Yeah.
I is less than n. It would be 1, I guess.
Yeah, because we're also starting the column out at the same place.
J is less than. I was going to initialize a different count than J plus plus. Because in the if statement, if count was greater than n, but it might be complicated this way. Should I keep doing it this way?
I mean, that's a I think you could just have two, like break it down into two different nested for loops. Like just one for the top half and one for the bottom half. That might make it a little easier. Or we could do an if statement. That's a smart idea too.
Yeah, let's undo this. Count is less than n. All right, I like that. I forgot if I can write C++ like that. Let's
Yeah, I
see.
know. I'm used to other languages.
See out.
Oh, see out. You
Oh,
want to do see out instead of count.
and then like that. Count.
Oh, I think you have to also do the using namespace std at the beginning. Yeah, it's really weird that it doesn't have that. It makes you do the like std colon colon before see out.
Oh,
I think this one needs to be changed.
error, comma before C.
Oh, this needs a semicolon over here.
Oh, I keep forgetting. C++ type. Okay, I'm trolling. Let's see. Well, and L. Okay, I got halfway. That's oh, 2n. 2 times n.
Yeah, so we wanted to have 2n, actually 2n minus 1 rows, I think. Yeah, so it should make a total of 7 rows if it's 4.
This last one count. I'm just messing up this one row. This row should have 4, right?
Yeah, maybe it has to be less than or equal to.
4 count, probably.
Yeah.
Um,
Instead of having a variable for count, well, I'd say we could probably just kind of use the halfway point, like to, would that be?
how would you do the halfway? Just
I guess you could do two, well, I don't know.
oh, row. This would be column up to R or I. Halfway would be
So once you get to 4, actually, wait, once you get to n, then you start decreasing the value. So what if we have it like if it's greater, if the row is greater than n, that's when you do a reverse loop.
a reverse loop.
Like starting from like uh n minus 1 stars and then decreasing -1, -1, -1 each time. For
Guess I did
instance, right,
this. Right.
yeah, yeah. So we could start at instead of starting at 1, we can do starting at n minus 1, right? Because we want to have 3 stars if that's the case. And then we can go till it gets to 0 and decrease it each time.
And then, yeah, see if that works. Uh, okay. There's one. I feel like there should be a 0 now.
Um, no, I
No
think it would
difference.
be better as 1 because right now it's like you start at row 1, column 1.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, what about over here? We're saying to actually no, because that's starting at 1 and it's going to go the number of stars based on what I is. So it's going to loop upwards anyway.
That has to be greater than 0. Right there.
Oh,
Mm,
okay, there you
less than
go.
or equal to.
Yeah, and then that one less than or equal to as well.
Is this
Oh,
right?
I think the columns need to be as well. Less than or equal to.
Oh,
Oops.
yeah, there. That seems right.
Yay. Yeah, that's it. Only took too many tries.
Yeah.
All right, so let's explain how this is working, right? Since I think you guys are probably very like as confused as we were. So in this case, right, we have two nested loops, right? We broke it in half. This is the part that looks like this little staircase going this way. And then you have the part of the staircase going this way, right? So we broke it in half. So this time we're starting out at row 1, right? And we're going until we reach row n. Because in row n, I'm going to have n stars. I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 stars. So this is like the midway point, because after this point, we're going to decrease the number of stars. So this would be 3, and then 2, and then 1. You get the picture. So with that being said, right, we want to do 4 rows here. And in each row, we're going to do the number of stars looped from 1 until I being the number of rows. Meaning that when we're in row 1, we're going to loop 1 time. When we're in row 2, we're going to loop 2 times. When we're in row 3, we're going to loop 3 times. And when we're in row 4, we're going to loop 4 times. And now we've reached n. So at this point, we're done with this loop. After each row, you want to make sure that you see out an end-L, because that allows you to go from this line to this line. Now that you're onto this loop over here, right, this is going to work backwards. This time our I is going to be starting at n minus 1. So that's 4 minus 1, which is 3. That tells you I want to have 3 stars in this row over here. It's going to go until that counter is 0. And just like last time, we're starting out with the star counter as 1, and it's until it's less than or equal to I. And for each of those, we'll see out a star. So that means 1 star, 2 star, 3 star. Then we go to our next row, right? We have another see out end-L over here. 1 star, 2 star, because this time we're subtracting. This loop is going backwards. End-L again, and this one over here is going to be 1 star. And at that point, we stop. So the difference of using with the I++ and the I-, is this is starting at your lowest value and going to the highest value. It's increasing. This is starting at the highest value and going to the lowest value. It's decreasing. So I hope that makes a little sense. Questions? The second loop, yeah. So again, this second loop, right? We broke this down into 2 pieces, right? Because this, the top side of the loop, is increasing the number of stars as you go through the loop. The bottom half is decreasing the number of stars. So I start out with I is equal to n minus 1. So that's saying, okay, it's going to be a row of 3 stars. And I'm still going to have the same C loop over here, right? I'm going to start out at j is equal to 1, continue until j is no longer less than or equal to I. So that's saying loop from 1 to 3. So that's giving me 1 star, 2 star, 3 stars. Then I go to the next line over here, and I do that again. I loop again. This time it's I minus minus. So this time instead of 1 to 2, 1 to 3, it's going to be 1 to 2. So that's why I print 1 star, 2 star. Next line. Now it's just 1 to 1, just 1 star that gets printed out. So the top loop is going up, it's increasing, and we know that based on j is less than or equal to I. And the bottom loop is going to be decreasing. It's going from n, the top value, until you get to 0. Okay. Let's try another problem. Yulong, you want to try this one? I'll set it in the chat. Problem 2.
I can't even see the chat.
It's the downward triangle. So like if it looks like this, right? 3, 4, 1. Like something like this, right?
4, 2, 1.
It's going to have n rows and 2 minus n columns. So if it's n rows, if n is 4, that means you're going to have 4 columns. I mean, 4 rows, sorry. And 2n minus 1 columns. So that's 8 minus 1. So 7 columns here. And then 5 columns on the next one, 3 columns on the next, and 1 on the last. So 2n minus 1 is going to be the columns, and it's going to be n rows. So just like last time, you can use the same part over here for getting the number from the user. Get rid of all my scribbles.
So we'll go up to n times, the next row is n minus 2. It's just printing it being centered is not fun.
Yeah, now you got to get the spaces together.
So up to n. This first one is pretty much right, but n minus 2, 5. Is 4. And K2. I was gonna do just print the white space and then print the stars and then white space again.
This is a good way of doing it.
It's equals to 0 up to. So for each row, we just increment 1. K is less than I should be fine. K plus plus. No way. Control C. Control. And then this minus 2. No.
Oh.
Well, that's.
Oh, I think because it's starting at the max value. So it's starting at n, the star part, and then it decreases.
Wait, what?
So wait, J is going to start off at n. Wait, is it n?
I don't want any for the first. My first one should be 7. So I.
Oh, wait, 2n minus 1. That's what it would be, right? Because it's going to be 2n minus 1, because the first one has the full columns. So we want to start off at the maximum value. So J is going to equal 2n minus 1. And will decrease each time.
Decrease.
Yeah. And then J is less than or equal to, I guess, 1. Because you're going until it's 1 at the very bottom.
Well, you want to initialize J to 2n minus 1?
Yeah, like you know on the last one how we worked backwards?
Oh, okay. So this would still be n. J minus
Yeah, the
minus.
rows could stay as that.
Oh, into nothing. uh, less than n. Right. I j is greater than. Back.
Okay, I mean it's coming along.
Yeah, I needed to do the 2 minus 1 part back here, I'm pretty sure. Or the end, so 753. That needs.
Wait a sec, I think it might be -2 because after every column it's -2. So you know how we say J minus minus? We want it. Oh
Oh,
no, no,
I see,
sorry.
I
Like
see what you
yeah,
mean.
yeah. So instead of doing J minus minus, which is J minus 1, we want to subtract 2 stars from each of the columns.
That's a little funky.
Oh gosh.
And this is why I don't like these types of problems.
Yeah, you and me both.
But it still says to. Let me see.
So it seems to be printing an extra 1, then an extra 2, then an
Yeah.
extra 3. Maybe the stopping condition is off then. Like this part over here. Since it doesn't seem to know when to stop.
Greater than I. I mean, I don't think that makes a difference. Um, really hate this. Getting these in the back.
You know what? When in doubt, consult AI. It's a great learning tool, guys. Let's see. Okay, so they did it very similar to you in the sense of separating it between the leading spaces
Hmm.
and the stars, and
Actually, I
then
don't. Yeah, I probably don't even need this
yeah,
because
actually,
by
yeah,
default,
because on the other
by
side,
default, yeah,
yeah.
by
So yeah,
default it's
once you make a
faces.
new line, yeah, when you make a new line, it's like it doesn't even matter. So let's see, what are we messing up on? Oh, okay, wait. J is okay, for the stars, the condition that they used was J is equal to 0. J is less than 2 times n minus 1 minus, wait, sorry. J is less than 2 times,
Oh,
so J is equal
zero,
to 0, yeah. J
two
is less
times.
than 2 times parenthesis n minus I end parenthesis minus 1,
Yeah, I would not have
and
come up
then J plus plus.
with that on the spot.
Yeah, honestly, there might be an easier way to do it, but
Let's see, less than equals. Sure is a minus one. Yeah.
um, well, that works too.
uh, n minus I row 4.
Okay, wait, okay, so let's think of it this way, right? We're on 1, so 4
Ah,
minus 1 is 3 times 2 is 6. So how are we getting 7 stars? Maybe because we're starting out at 0. That could be it. That's adding that extra 1 in,
oh,
right? So if I were to solve this, like let's say I do 4 minus 1, because you're in the first row, this is equal to 3, which times 2 is going to give you 6. But because I'm starting out at 0, this is going from 0 to 6, which is actually going to be 7 characters long. So that's how I think, that's probably what that minus, well, they also had equal 0, whatever. So it goes from 0 to 6 essentially. So this difference kind of tells you like, hey, um, how many stars that you're going to be doing. That's how you get from 7 to 5, 3 to 1.
oh, it makes sense now. Yeah.
Yeah, this was honestly, it looks simple, but it's more confusing.
Yeah.
All right.
I usually give this for exams. I mean, I didn't take 111 here, so I wouldn't know.
I took a different professor than Akinlar, so I just remember a variety of different questions like what's the output, write a function, like
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. Okay.
All right. Does anybody else have questions on this? I mean,
Yeah, or questions in general, like if you have any like, hey, what's the output of this? Or write a function for that. Something like that we could go over. If you have any sample questions, I think the ones that you guys sent were mostly code based, which I mean we could do as well. Oh, so like one of every subject, meaning like one of each of these code questions it's going to be? Okay, so then if that's
I
the
can't
case,
see
then it's
chat.
all going to be those code-based ones. Okay, if that's the case, then which topic would you like to go over? The professor said that we're going to have something like this in the final exam.
I wish you the best.
Oh, there's going to be recursion too. Yikes.
I mean, Akinlar is pretty nice, so should be fine.
Yeah, I heard that he's making 111 a little bit more difficult.
I took him for 323, and I think he passed like everybody. So, I mean, as long as you guys do decently well on the midterm, I can't see you failing.
Is there a recursion question on the exam? I don't see that as one of the topics to the person that asked that. Okay, we didn't learn it yet. Okay, I just want to be sure. Yeah. Next review, we could go over that. Let's just try to keep with what's actually going to be on the exam because you want to be as prepared as possible. Short answer. Yeah. What do you mean by a short answer? Like, do you have a sample question like that? The short answer for oh, it's right there. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah, I see it. Okay, yeah, so I see that we have some of the short answer questions. Let me take a look and see what we could do. Right, let's see this first question over here. Okay,
You want to
so
share screen?
yeah, I'll share my screen now.
Right.
Okay, so over here we have write C++ statements to carry out the following tasks. Do not write complete programs. Just give a single line of C++ code. No answer can use more than one line of code. Assume that variables x, y, z with type int have been declared, right? So this is kind of testing your logic skills with this, right? You want to know that you have int x, int y, and int z that were all declared. So I want to prompt the user to enter values for x, y, and z. Okay, well, prompting is saying cout. So cout, enter values, right? Doesn't really matter what you have there. It's just a cout statement. Read in the values of x, y, and z given by the user, right? I can say x, I can concatenate that with y, and I can do that with z. So what this will result in is every time that this pops up, right, it's going to let the user prompt in 3 different values. And like the first enter, the second enter, and then the third enter will be 3 different views. So if I were to run that, right, 1, 2, 3. There you go. Because again, we don't want to use more than one line of code. So now if x is less than y, which is less than z, replace z by y minus x. All right, well, if is telling us that it's an if statement. So if x is less than y, now I can't just say this, x is less than y less than z. This is going to give me an error in this case. I have to separate this into 2 different pieces and link them with the and symbols, right? So this is saying if x is less than y and x is less than z, then what am I doing? I want to replace z. So now z is going to be equal to y minus x. And all of this can be on the same line, by the way. You don't have to make your if statements on another line. Like this would be totally fine. All right, and then let's see the next part, set x to be the remainder when y is divided by z. Okay, well, anytime that we have remainder, that's going to be the modulus. So x is going to be set to the remainder when y is divided by z. So y mod z. This is the remainder from when y is divided by z. That's set to x. And print x copies of the word hello, each on its own line of output. Okay, well, before that, I just want to kind of test these guys just to make sure that this is good, right? C out z and C out x. Let's just do a little test run of this guy. So this if statement is saying if x is less than y and it's less than z. So I'm going to just say 1, 2, 3. So we're going to have 10. Wait, but where are we getting 10 from? Oh, I never put an end else statement here. So because of that, these two the out statements are put together on the same line. So you'll see this is the same thing, right? It's going to be a 1 and a 0. The 1 is because y minus x, right? 2 minus 1 is 1. That's where the 1 comes from. And then the next part, x is equal to y mod z. Let's say 2 mod 3. So, yeah, so with that, now x is just equal to 0 for that, right? Wait, 2 divided by 3. Okay, well, the remainder is a decimal, so I guess that's probably why it would be. But anyway, so this works. And now for the last part, right? I'm just going to get rid of these lines. So it's good to test your code, just making sure things work. The next part is asking print x copies of the word hello, each on its own line of output. So whenever you say something like x copies, this is a sign that we want to use a for loop, right? You could use a while loop or you could use a for loop, but a for loop is good because I can do it all on one line, right? So for int I is equal to 0, I is less than, well, I'm going to do x copies. So I'm going to go until it's less than or equal to x, right? So this is going to say, actually, I should start at 1, right? So this 1 would mean 1 copy of x. Or actually, yeah, this is fine. And then I plus plus. And now what am I going to do? Well, for every time this is looping, I'm going to print out C out, hello, and an end L. Okay. So let me do larger values so you can see. 4, 5, 6. Whoa, what happened? Why is... Oh, wait, because x is the value of y mod z, so I actually have to get something that kind of works here. You know what? I'm just going to comment these guys out just so that I don't have to worry about getting a value that works. Yeah. Okay, so this is going to print it out x times, right? So what is x? X is 4, the first value. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time what happened was sometimes if this module returns like a decimal value and we're dealing with integers, we get 0, and that's why it wasn't printing. So we want to make sure that that's good. So that was just a problem with the inputs, not necessarily the code. So that would be that question. What's going on in the chat? How are we feeling about this? Do you want to do another one of the short answer questions or? Another short answer? All right, cool. Let me try to find one that's a little bit more difficult. Okay, I could do this one. This one looks a little tricky. Okay, so I'm going to do question 6. So question 6 is saying the same thing. We want to just write a single line or 2, right? This one's saying most answers need no more than 2 lines, and no solution can use more than 4 lines. So you're not writing a whole program here. You're just writing like a line or 2 of code. So we got these things over here. I'm just going to copy that in, make it easy. All right, int x, actually int x comma y comma age double z string name and a and b. Okay. Just putting spaces just so I can kind of see them a little bit clearer. So what are we doing on the first one? Print and then read values from the screen for variables x and y in this order. Okay, this is just simple. See out, enter numbers or whatever you want to say here. And I'm reading values for both x and y. So cin x and y. Okay. So if x is negative, assign name as Freddy, otherwise as Jack. Okay, we could just do an if statement. If x is less than 0, because then it would be negative, then the name is going to be set to Freddy. Okay, else name is set to Jack, right? Just a simple if statement. If it's negative, it's this. If it's not negative, then this.
I have a question.
Yes.
For the CN, you can put a comma between the X and Y. But you have to put like another greater than bigger than.
Thank you for catching that. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think I was just mixing it up with this. So yeah, anytime that you're going to be doing CN or C out, you want to make sure that you're using those greater than and less than signs. Okay, so we set the name, right? Now we print the name a total of y times on different output lines. All right, we kind of did this before, so let's just do it again for practice. For int I equals 0, I is less than or equal to, should do this as 1, it's less than or equal to y, and y plus plus, right? Just doing this y times, and we're just going to print out, see out the name. So name is a variable, so I'm just calling the variable over here, right? We set the name up here. I'm not going to actually type in Jack or Freddy. It's whatever this was assigned to. And it's always on its own line, so you want to make sure you do end L. And that's the for loop for that part. Part C, part D. Until x and y are not equal, repeatedly make the user enter a new value for y. Okay, so until x and y are not equal. So anytime you hear until, that's your keyword that you want to use the while loop. So while this condition is true, while x is not equal to y, constantly prompt the user to enter a new value.
I'm pretty sure it's if x and y are equal, then you have to just until x and y are not. So they have to input two different numbers.
Till x and y are not equal. Yeah, so then they would have to be the same then. Okay. Okay, so C out a new y and C in y. So if I were to pick, let's say, 1 and 1, this is because I never put an end statement for the while loop over here, right? So the for loop over here. Wait. I did though. For I is equal to 1, while I is less than or equal to y.
You're doing y plus plus.
I plus plus, yeah. Yeah, okay. So because I was never incrementing the I variable, we had a bit of an issue. Okay, so enter a new y, right? These guys are equal, so that's why this is printing. Now, if I keep saying 1, they're still equal. But now, at this point, I'll say 4. Now it stopped. So at this point, that part's done for part D, and now part E is print the last digit of the larger of x and y. So let's do a comparison. If x is greater than y, then we're going to print out the last digit of x. And how do we find the last digit? Well, I can do x mod 10. What this does is it takes the remainder if a number is divisible, if a number gets divided by 10, and that's just going to return the last digit. So if I have a number like 1, 2, 3, if I divide that by 10, it's going to go in 12 times with the remainder of 3. This 3, this last digit, would be outputted. So I'm just going to do x mod 10, right? And then I want to have an else statement for if it's not, if x is not greater than y, then we're going to do the same thing, but for y mod 10. And both of these should have end else. Yeah. So it printed out 5 times. It didn't do this loop over here because they weren't equal, and it printed out the last digit. So let's say if I have larger numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Look at that. It printed out the last digit of the 456, and it printed out Jack about 456 times. So that's a lot. But yeah, so this is the end of this question over here. I hope that was clear. Like I say, that was pretty quick for printing out that a bunch of times, especially for a online compiler. All right, how are we feeling, guys? What kind of question do you want to go over next?
I had a question, but I was looking at it like on my own. Can you go to number 20? Hold on. Yeah, it was 20. Um, at the end, it says print the square root of 3 equals 7. What does that even mean?
That's really weird. Print the square, and this one is even saying 3 equals 8. It's the square root function. CMath.
equal 12. I know that it's square root. You can see math, but I just don't know what the square root of 3 equals 7 is supposed to like mean. I don't know how to put that out.
I mean, if you're just using the square root, then it should just be like that, and you can include it, unless there's another way of doing it or something.
On the exams, I think you are expected to use the square root function from the CMath library.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah, I
thinking.
think this is a typo.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that then. If anything, I would just use the square root function here. Just make sure you include CMath. And it's just SQRT with the number of that. I don't think you're allowed to use a calculator on the exam.
Okay. I think what they're asking is print the square root of 3 and multiply it by 7. Like the product of the square root of 3 times 7.
So it's like it's just a typo. Like it's not gonna come up like that on the like 3 equals 7 because like does 3 equals 7 mean to do that normally?
Yeah, because it doesn't mean anything, the typo, or it has no real meaning in terms of what you learned in C++ in this class.
Yeah. See, 3 equals 7 is invalid. Yeah. If it was something like setting a variable equal to it, like, I don't know if this was like x equals 7. Okay, you're using x, but it's like you can't set two integers equal to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you see something like this on the exam, there's a good chance it's a typo. You should probably ask about it.
Okay.
Yeah, Akinlar answers questions during the exam, so would not stress. Okay. What kind of question would you guys like to go over next? Would you want to do another one of the short answers or code question, or I think most of these are kind of similar. Absolute value is the absolute value function. I believe that's also from the CMath value. That's ABS. Yeah, we can do another one of these. Let me see if there's anything really tricky here. Oh, this one looks fun. All right, let's do this one. Right, so we have int x and int y. So print 12 copies of the word hello on a single line of output. Okay, and we have to do a for loop over here. So we're going to have int I is equal to 1 and I is less than or equal to 12, I plus plus, and C out hello, each on its own line. That's your sign to use end L. Oops, I forgot a bracket. The next part B, print the remainder when variable x is divided by variable y. Neither of these guys were initialized. Assume the following variables have been declared and initialized with positive values. Okay, so if that's the case, let's just say int is equal to 5 and int y is equal to 10. So print the remainder when variable x is divided by variable y. C out x mod y. And I could also do that on an end L for a new line after. Okay. Now part C, print the square root of 19. Use a C++ function for calculation. So that is saying that we are going to use the CMath. So I need to make sure I include that, include CMath. Now I'm good to use the function. So I can do print the square root of 19.
Lauren, you forgot a bracket in the for loop at the end.
Thank you. Missing brackets and missing semicolons are the bane of computer science majors everywhere. Okay, and now we print a random number in the range 23 to 34 inclusive. Use a C++ function. All right, so whenever we are going to do that, right, we want to use the srand function. And I always forget the exact context of this srand function formula. Okay. So whenever we do srand, right, wait, are we doing a few lines of C++ code? Okay, so I think they're just asking for the line itself, right? Which is this one over here, right? So this is saying that we're going to call the random function over here, right? And we're going to mod it by the max value minus the min value plus 1 plus the min value again. So that's going to end up looking like this, right? Our max number is 34 minus the min number of 23 plus 1, and then plus the min value again, 23. So we want to see out this right here. And let me just make sure. Okay, we want to use this library now, CST DLIB. Right, so a lot of these functions, right, anytime it says use a C++ function, a lot of these guys are not included within your function library by default, right? So you have to include them, just like how you include IOStream. If I were to actually get rid of this, I couldn't do any couts or cins because I wouldn't have input output IO. So because I have CMath, I can do square root. Because I have CST DLIB, then I am good to do the random number. Okay, let me just test this out and make sure that we're not getting errors. Of course we're getting errors.
It's ran mod 34 minus, yeah. So I think you just forgot the mod symbol.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay. Thanks for catching that. Yeah, okay, that's what it was. I'm missing another parenthesis, right?
So the rand generates a random number, and then you have to mod to get it within your range. So you just have to close off those parentheses. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was. Okay, thank you. Oh, perfect. Yeah, all right. So right here, right, we have it's printing out hello 12 times, right? Then we have cout x mod y. Yeah, that's if 5 was divided by 10. So that has a remainder of 5, right? Then we take the square root of 19, that has it over here. And then it generated us a random number for 30, since that's between 23 and 34. And now if you notice, if I keep running this, it's technically going to give me the same exact number. The reason for this is because we didn't change it using, we didn't like kind of initialize it using the ctime function, which you probably went over a little bit in class. But since he's just asking for the random itself, I think this is fine. If you were going to write the actual code, you'd have to include this library for ctime. And what this does is you kind of set, you could think of it as like the seed for like the random number generator, almost like if you're playing a Minecraft game. You set it to 0, right? And now at this point, once I do this, it would then give me a different number each time. So actually, let's just do that as well. That way you can kind of see how that looks. Right, so we want to just set, yeah, I can just do this part. sran time is equal to 0. This is what I was familiar with. Then I think I have to use sran down here as well. Or not. Yeah, okay, perfect. So you see now the number's changing, right? 23, it was 29 before, 33, 29, 29, 31. It seems to really like 29, 26, 34, 32. So the reason for this is because before it was like one number that it picked and that was it. It wouldn't change that number throughout the whole program. This resets the seed every time that this thing runs. So it's picking a new number each time. This is just asking for a random number for like a single line of code. So chances are, I believe he would just be asking for this. Therefore, you just want to kind of just memorize this formula here. But if you were doing this on like an actual code function, like a whole program you were writing, you need to keep in mind that you need these two libraries. You need to reset your seed, and then you can do your random number function. It's a lot to generate just a simple single number, right? Okay. And the
So
last,
it's
yeah.
sorry. So
No, go
it's
ahead.
the rand and then modulo max minus min plus 1. And then you
Yes.
add the min again on the outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason that this works, right, is, okay, let's say we have 34 minus 23 plus 1, right? So 34 minus 23 is 11, plus 1 is 12, plus 23. Wait, why is this the reason again?
So you're basically trying to figure out how many numbers there are between 23 to 34. If you subtract 23 from 34, you're missing one number, so you add it back on. And then when you mod it by that number, mod will give you a range from 0 to 1 less that number. So to bring it back within the range that you want to add back on your minimum number. That's like the gist of it.
Gotcha. Thank you, Kathy. Okay. So if we're good with that, let's do this last part. So print the digits of the variable x backwards. So if x is 25, print 52. Okay, cool. So for this, right, we want to create a for loop that goes through the number of digits, right? So we want to start out with 4, and I is equal, actually, you know what? Let's use a while loop instead. Okay, well, x is greater than 0. We're going to keep chopping off digits and outputting them until there are no digits left, right? So if we have like the number 123, right? I want to pop off this digit, I want to output it, and then I want to chop it off entirely so that I can get this digit now, pop it off, chop it off. And I can do that by using the mod and the division. So what I can do here is I can say, all right, Well, x is greater than 0. First, see out the last digit in x. And we can do that by doing x mod 10. So again, if it was 1, 2, 3, 3 would be outputted. Cool. Now, x is going to be equal to x divided by 10. What that's going to do is that's going to say, okay, I'm dealing with integers here. So I'm going to divide off this by 10. And we know that would be equal to 12.3, right? Well, because these guys are integers, anything after the decimal point can't be saved. So this gets chopped off and you're just left with the 12. So that's a good way to get rid of a digit if you don't want it. So this is going to keep looping now until this gets to a point where x is 0. Right, so wait, did we change x or something? Oh, because this is on the wrong. Okay, yeah. Always make sure whenever you do something, it's on the right here, over here, right? You want to make sure that it's on a new line because it just outputted the random number and this guy like that. So what I want to do here is I want to, let's make this 123 to make our lives a little easier. And you'll see this guy made it to become 3, 2, 1. So by looping and constantly going through, popping off a digit and then chopping off a digit until we have no number left, we're able to essentially print out a number backwards like that. Does that make sense? Yeah, I can explain that one more time. No, don't worry. It's all good. So while x is equal to 0, I do this because I'm going to slowly work backwards and make this number smaller and smaller as I chop these digits off. So until there's nothing left of the number, what I'm going to do is I'm going to output x mod 10. All right, what's x mod 10? Well, that means this 3. I'm going to output this 3. But now I want to get rid of this 3 because I want to get to that next number. This 3 is blocking my way. So I'm going to do x is equal to x divided by 10. We know this is 12.3, but because this is an integer, right? It can't hold any decimal values. So this 3 kind of gets deleted, and you're left with just 12. Now I can repeat the process again, because again, with a while loop, it's testing. Hey, is it still greater than 0? Yes, it is. We're going to see out the last digit. This time it's 2. Then I chop the digit off, right? 1.2, it can't hold that 2. I'm left with 1. We do it again. See out the last digit. This is 1. Chop off this last digit. What am I left with? 0. So with that being said, now x is no longer greater than 0. So that marks the end of the loop. So in the end, it'll output the digits backwards. 3, 2, 1.
Lauren, since you have to head out soon, could you send me the questions and I can take over?
Yes, thank you so much. I'll send
Yeah,
them
no
over.
problem.
Sent. I think there's 3 of them.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you so much. All right, unfortunately,
no
I have to head
problem.
out, but enjoy the rest of the session, everyone. Yes, it will end at 5. I just have to head out a little earlier. And once again, the session is going to be posted on the following website as well. And also just remember, please fill out the sign out form just for a little feedback at the end of the session. I'll also post that as well.
Have a good day, everyone.
Okay, I just have to take a moment to set up, but I'll soon start continue where Lauren left off. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So do we want to continue where Lauren left off with the short answer questions, or move on to other types of questions?
Only thing I'm really struggling with is the nested loops. I can't really follow them.
Okay. I can go over some of the nested loops questions. Let's see. Which ones did Lauren go over?
1 and 2.
Okay, then I can attempt 3. So for these, before I start writing the code, I like to draw out the shapes and try to figure out what patterns happen as a result of those shapes. So since the first triangle that this should be printing is a lower right triangle, I want to draw an example triangle of size 4. And also label the rows and columns along with this. So when the user types in n equals 4, one way I could set up my rows and columns is I could have my rows starting at 1 and going down to n, which is the user's number. In this case, the user's number that they're going to give you is 4. So my rows would go from 1, 2, 3, 4. And my columns, I could also have them set up to start up from 1, going up to n as well. And in this case, n is 4. So I can see that what's very significant with these kind of triangles is what happens on the diagonal. So we end up printing for these triangles up until they hit this diagonal. So on these diagonals, we can see that for the first row, it stops printing past column 1. So the row and column match for this diagonal, and the row and column match for this diagonal, and the row and column match for this diagonal as well. So with these right triangles, they always you want to look at the diagonal first. In this case, I can see that this triangle is printing while the column number is equal to the row number, or if it's less than the row number. So we can see this in better in column 3, because not column 3, row 3. When we're in row 3, we can see that it will print when the column is equal to 1 for this x, when the column is equal to 2 for this x, and when the column is equal to 3 for this x. But it won't print when we hit 4. So that means for the lower right triangles like these, lower left triangles, the pattern is that we want to print an x when our column, I say, let's call it C, is less than or equal to our row number, which is R. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, I have that.
Okay. So I want to remember that this is one of my conditions for printing. My second condition for printing is if I use the same setup to look at the second kind of triangle that's happening, I'm going to redraw this. We can see that it also has a similar pattern on the diagonal, but instead it seems to be doing the opposite of what the previous triangle was doing, which is it wants to print when the column number is greater than or equal to the row number. Because we can see that for row 1, it's printing when the column is 1, when the column is 2, 3, and 4. So it's equal to 1 or greater. And if we look at row 3, it's not printing at 1, not printing at 2, but it is printing at 3 and 4. So for the second kind triangle, the pattern there is we want to print when C is greater than or equal to R. So I'm going to label the patterns for the certain kind of triangles that I want to print, so I don't lose track of that. So after we print a triangle, the other thing that is happening here is we end up printing a line of dashes in between. So let's say once we finish printing a triangle, I want to then go to the next line and have a for loop that goes from 1 to n to print n dashes so that we have a separation between the triangles. Another thing about this pattern is that this is repeating vertically. So if it's repeating vertically, what we want to be repeating is actually the rows, because the rows create verticality. Because if we can see with the previous examples, let's say this triangle, this is a simpler triangle, but we can see that this is the number for the rows. So the first row prints on one line, and it goes to the next line to print the second row. So if you see a pattern that is repeating certain shapes, but each on their own line like this, you want to have a third for loop outside of the row for loop, so that the for loop that is controlling the rows is going to repeat n times as well. As opposed to this, if you have a pattern that is, instead of doing what this pattern is doing and goes like this, where you're repeating the shapes horizontally, instead of having the for loop to repeat outside of the rows, instead you want to have the columns repeating, because the columns are creating horizontal, kind of that horizontal thing happening there. It's a little confusing, but I'll put it together at the end. So I have kind of all the things that I want here. I have the pattern for my lower left triangle. I have the pattern for my upper right triangle. And I also know how to deal with this and the verticality here. So I'll start putting that together in code here. Let's see. So here's they want you to write a complete C++ program. So I'll write it from scratch. So you have your standard beginning, hashtag include IOStream. You do get partial credit during these questions for including the standard beginning. Using namespace std, int main, beginning bracket and closing bracket, and then you return 0 line at the end. So the first thing I want to do is what this program does first is you want to prompt the user and ask them for a number n. So first I have to take input from the user. So they kind of give you n to be your variable name. So I'll first declare a variable to hold what the user's input is, called int n. And then I will print something to the screen to prompt the user to give me a number n. Let's see. So in the code, they say, here's the example they give, enter the number of triangles. So if you see that, you should probably write down the same thing in your own code. And have a colon space. So the space here is just to give some separation between what you're printing and what the user enters. So after I prompt the user, I then want to take their input. And I take input using cin n. So after this line, n should hold the user's number. So if the user's number ends up being 4, you'll see what's being printed will be similar to what you see in the example given here. So the first thing I want to do is create the for loop to for the rows. Actually, no, you want to create the for loop to repeat the rows. So I will name this for loop T for triangle. So this for loop is going to control how many triangles are getting printed. So I'll start it at T equals 1. And then I'll have it go up until N. And do T++. So this for loop, I wanted to control how many triangles are getting printed. So since this is being, since each triangle is happening on its own line vertically like this, I actually want this to be, this for loop to contain the for loop for the rows. So the next thing I want to set up is the for loop for the rows. Start it at 1. You don't have to start at 1 if you prefer to start your rows differently. You can. You just have to make sure that the patterns that you just have to make sure that let's see. So here C is less than or equal to R might not be correct if you start your row from N and then at 1. So for me, I like to start it at 1 and then at N to make things easier for myself. Okay, so this is the for loop for the rows, and then I want to then create the for loop for the columns. So the for loop for the columns is nested inside the for loop for the rows, which is also nested inside the for loop for the number of triangles. And I set up my for loop for the columns similarly to how I set it up for the rows. So where you want to start describing your patterns should happen inside the for the columns, because then you know what C is and you know what R is. So here I would say if T mod 2 is equal to 1. Okay. So a thing I did forget to mention is you can see here that the pattern for the triangle is alternating. First you print this kind of triangle, then you print this kind of triangle. So if you see an alternating pattern here, usually you want to attribute something to the odd numbers and attribute something to the even numbers. So you can see here in this example that when your T is odd, you print the lower left triangle. When your T is even, you print the upper right triangle. So here, when t is equal to 3, you're printing this triangle. When t is equal to 4, you print this triangle. So a way I can control that is inside my for loop for the columns. I can say that when t mod 2 is equal to 1, so that will give me an odd number. I can then do, so now that I know that I'm at an odd t, I know that I have to print out the triangle that looks like this. So my pattern for the triangles that look like that is C less than or equal to R. So if I am printing that kind of triangle, if my column number is less than or equal to R, I want to print an X. Otherwise, so I do else because if my T is not odd, it's definitely going to be even. So if it's an even T, I'm going to be printing the other type of triangle. So I can use the other pattern that I found, which is if C is greater than or equal to R, I want to see out X. So this if statement is making sure that this and this are not happening at the same time. So if my T is odd, I print out the lower left triangle pattern. If my T is even, then I print out the upper right triangle pattern. Another thing I did forget to mention is with these upper right triangle patterns, you have leading spaces, as in you need to make sure that if you're not printing an X, you're printing a blank
Empty
space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this preserves the pattern of your triangle. So since this is my pattern for my upper right triangle, if I'm not printing an X, I want to print a space to preserve that pattern. Okay, and this should take care of printing for the triangles. The other thing I want to make sure is that once I'm out of my column loop, I'm now back in my row loop. I've just finished printing a line of X's. So to make sure that I'm not just printing all the X's on one line for every triangle, I want to say C out N line in my row loop. So this C out N line is happening in the row loop, which means after I print a line of X's, I go to the next line, print the next line X's.
So where do you put the dashes?
Oh yeah, I forgot the dashes. Okay, so after I printed out my triangles, so this C out here, or this column loop handled my dashes for me. Oh, not my dashes. This column loop is handling my triangles. This is making sure I'm going to the next line. So now that I'm at my next line after my triangle, I do a for loop to print my dashes. And my dashes are being printed out at the same number N as my I'm printing out N dashes basically. So
Yeah.
you need to create a for loop for it. So I'll say it D is equal to 1, D less than equal to N, D plus plus, and I just say C out dash. So after I print my dashes, I do need to do C out N line again. Otherwise, your next triangle might happen on the same line as the dashes. So after I have this, I should have the complete pattern. So I'll try to run this.
Yeah, we do have to write all this on with Arian.
Let's see. Someone have a question? Yes, you would have to handwrite all this.
It's just so like it's so much. It's a lot.
Yeah, with these especially with the ones that are repeating vertically or repeating horizontally, it does tend to be a lot of code. Let's see. I think the best way to learn this is some of the triangles that happen that are more common are the right triangles that look like the ones you see here, or the flat triangles in one of the earlier problems. There's a good chance you're not going to be given a problem this long though. When you see this pattern happening vertically or horizontally, the code tends to be longer. Let's see. Oh, interesting. I have made a mistake. I think the positioning of my dashes is incorrect. Okay. Oh, I see. These dashes should be happening after my row loop. And the reason for this is that one run of my row loop will print out one triangle. So this entire thing here is responsible for printing out one triangle. So after my triangle is done printing, I then want to do my dashes. But I'll trace this out to like break down what each loop is responsible for in a bit after I make sure that this is running correctly. Okay, so you can see that it matches the pattern you see in the problem. Yeah. And after this, I'm going to clear these notes that I have here. Does anyone still need these? All right, then I will clear these out. And then I'm going to basically trace out what each for loop is actually doing. So this for loop this is where my R for loop begins and ends. What the R for loop is doing is it's going from rows 1 up until n. And then for each row, it does the column for loop. So the columns are going from, so if you're in row 1, you start on the first loop of your columns. So when you're on row 1, your row stays the same, but then you're iterating through the columns up until n. So what your program is basically doing is it's building this triangle one line at a time. So let's say if I'm at t equals 1, the first thing that my row for loop is doing is it's checking, is t odd? If it's odd, then I want to print when c is less than or equal to r. So the only time I print is actually here for the row for loop. But it's going to iterate through all the c's up until n. But you're not going to see anything happening because the c equal to 2 up until n are all greater than r. So nothing is going to happen for the rest of this for loop. So after it does that, it finishes, and it's going to go to the next line for r. And then basically, it's going to do the same thing again. You're going to go through all the for loop for the columns. So you can see here that when you do this, after you're done with one the for loop for the r, you actually end up building one triangle. So my r's are responsible for creating my triangles. My columns, my c loop is responsible for creating each line of the triangle. So if my r is building my triangle, if I run my r once, or once my r is done running, it's going to create one triangle. So I want to repeat that n times. So if I want to repeat that n times, I basically use another for loop to force the for loop for the R's to happen again and again and create more triangles. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So where this T is will change if I have a horizontally repeating triangle. So instead of this T being outside of the R for loop, it's only going to be outside of the R for loop if your pattern is repeating vertically and you're printing the triangles each on their own line, one after another like this. But if your triangles are being printed like this, where they're happening on the same line, this T is going to be outside of the C for loop actually. So that means what's going to happen here is you'll be at row 1. You're going to repeat one loop for the columns, stop, repeat one loop for another loop for the columns, and basically repeat that for as many triangles as you need. So you're going to build each triangle one line at a time, but instead you're just like, let's say you're at triangle 1, you build one line of it. Then the columns will stop, but your T will force the next column loop to go again and build the next line, the next triangle, but only one line of it. So it's going to keep doing that for n times. Then you go to R equal to 2. And when you're at R equals to 2, you do the same thing again, but now you're building the second line of each triangle. So that's like how these vertically repeating patterns or horizontally repeating patterns kind of work. Any questions about these patterns, or should I move on? If not, I can, oh wait, let's see a question. Yes? My advice for trying to earn the most patterns, oh, okay. I'll clear some of these drawings I've made so it's easier for people to see this. But I guess my advice for earning more points on the exam is people actually tend to lose a lot of points on the tracing problems, where you have to write the output you think is going to happen. The issue with those is you either get it right or you don't. So it's hard to get partial credit on those. I think getting docked points for improper indentation with your handwriting, I think it depends on your lab professor. Some of the lab professors might be more lenient than others, and they might understand what you're trying to get at with the code. So even if it doesn't look like the indentation is proper, if your code is correct, they'll be fine with it. If your code is correct, I think you'll be fine, honestly. If you do well on 3 out of 5 of the topics, I guess it depends on which topics you end up doing well on. Because if you do worse on 2 topics, if those topics are partial credit, I think you should at least try to study the nested for loops to kind of understand how to set up your loops. Because you can then at least get partial credit for those. Hajira and Nadeem, why do we need out and line? Could you let me know which line you're talking about, Hajira? Oh, as in for the nested for loops? As in this one? Okay, so the reason why you need this is Or one, I'll take it out and you can see what happens when you don't have this. So I'll put in the same number that I put in before. And you can see that when I don't put in the C out, the end line, C out end line, all the triangles, everything that gets printed is gonna get printed on the same line. So the structure of your triangle ends up breaking down. So what's happening here is actually, so the for loop for my columns ends up printing a line for my triangle. If I don't have this end line, when I go to the next column or when I go to the next row, it ends up printing the column again, but continuing off of here. So it's going to print the next line here as well. So what you see here is actually, this is all the X's that get printed in the triangle, but they're all getting printed on the same line because you don't have that end line to like preserve the structure. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see. It's 5. But okay, so it's 5. I could do one more question if people really want are really struggling with another topic. But otherwise, we might end the meeting. Like this particular question, I think I'm not sure. But I think since this one tends to be a little more complicated, um, there's you might not be super likely to get a question like this. But it is good to understand what to do in these types of questions. Yeah, okay. For this question, you're getting an error? Okay, I can copy paste, since it's running on my end, there might be a typo in your code somewhere. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this code and try running it at home. So this is the entire code. So you can take a screenshot, let me know when you're done. Otherwise, Yulong, if you could post the feedback form.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, oh, the question? It's question 3 from the practice exam. Yeah. You're not allowed to use calculators on this exam. You really shouldn't need it because you're not gonna get so if they have a question where they ask you to print the square root of a number, you should be using C++ functions to calculate it, as in write out the function. Yeah, you don't need to actually know what the square root of a number is. That's not what they're asking for. It's very likely, well, what they always mean is use a function, use math operators. You don't have to write the exact answer. Yeah. So if they say like print the square root of 7, on your exam sheet, you should it's not correct to say C out 2 point something. Instead, you should say C out square root parentheses 7, something like that. All right, so please fill out the feedback form. If you need more help with the midterm exam, you could come to tutoring at the Learning Commons. So if you search up Queens College Learning Commons, you can book an appointment before your exam, hopefully, if we have any tutors free for CS, but all of them do CS111 for this class. Otherwise, you can go to your lab instructor, try to go to their office hours and ask them more questions. Otherwise, I think if your professor posted up these practice exam problems, they should also have solutions as well. So you can look at those for more help and try to like work backwards from the code that he wrote there. Otherwise, we're pretty much done with the meeting. AI, you can, if you saw what Lauren was doing, she was using Gemini to figure out how to do a problem. But sometimes the AI might not know what level your class is at, so it might not give you the kind of code that you learn in class. So you should be a little careful. Yeah, you might have to be a little careful. Yeah. Yeah, but we're pretty much done with the session. Make sure to fill out the feedback form. We all have to head out, so good luck on your exams.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.